When I pulled into the driveway, the light was already fading. The air was crisp with the last whispers of spring, and for a moment I thought the quiet welcome was exactly what I needed after a 3-day work trip. But something didn't feel right. A black SUV I didn't recognize was parked at an angle like it belonged. There were faint traces of fresh tire marks across the gravel I had carefully laid last summer. I stepped out of my car, scanned the porch. The lights were on inside. A pair of unfamiliar shoes, white slip-ons I knew weren't mine, sat neatly beside the welcome mat. I paused, my keys still in my hand. I hadn't given anyone permission to stay here, not while I was away. There was a scent in the air too, sweet and powdery, something floral, not from the jasmine I planted along the back fence. My stomach tightened as I approached the door. Sliding my key into the lock, I noticed it turned differently, just a bit stiffer than usual, like someone had used it more than I had in the past few days. I turned the knob slowly, bracing myself. Inside, laughter floated from the living room. My parents were seated on the leather couch like it was Sunday brunch. Dad held a glass of red wine. Mom looked up at me, beaming like nothing was out of place. "You're back early, honey," she said. I didn't speak. My gaze followed the sound of heels clicking down the staircase. Aurelia appeared in a silk robe, hair wrapped in a towel, as if she had just stepped out of a spa. "Hey, sis," she said nonchalantly. "You should have told us you'd be back tonight." Us. My voice caught in my throat. I glanced around. Pillows moved, furniture slightly shifted, my favorite throw blanket replaced with something pink and tasseled. "I thought," Mom began, standing as if this were some pleasant surprise, "you'd be happy. Aurelia needed a place, and this house was just sitting empty while you worked." "Empty?" I said quietly. "It's my home." "She needed space," Dad chimed in, not even looking at me. "It just made sense." Aurelia smiled. "Besides, you're barely here. I figured we'd get some good content while I'm in town. The lighting in the front room is amazing for my morning routine videos." I looked at the staircase, trying to gather my thoughts. My childhood bedroom door was open. Through it, I saw candles, a yoga mat, and a ring light. She hadn't just moved in. She'd taken over. "When exactly did you decide this was okay?" I asked, keeping my tone even. Dad shrugged. "It's still the family house." "Legally, it's not," I said. "I own it. You know that." Mom sighed, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Don't be difficult, Alethea. We're just trying to help your sister get back on her feet. She's starting a new chapter." "And I'm apparently losing mine," I muttered. Aurelia stepped forward. "You live alone. You're always traveling. I thought you'd appreciate the company. Plus, I cleaned the guest bathroom." That wasn't the point. I was being spoken over in a house with my name on the deed. Invisible in my own living room. Later, when I retreated upstairs, I didn't go to my room. I went to the small office, the one I had converted from the attic after the inheritance. I closed the door, sat on the floor, and leaned against the wall. I remembered the day Grandpa's lawyer handed me the keys. The will was clear. Villa Paloma was mine. He had written me a letter too, folded neatly into an envelope with his unmistakable penmanship. "This house is yours to protect. It kept our stories. Now, it keeps yours." I had spent 2 years restoring it, ripping out old carpet, sanding floors, choosing light fixtures that matched the home's original design. Every choice, every hour after work spent here, was intentional. This wasn't just a house. It was proof that I had built something on my own, away from the chaotic orbit of a family that often made me feel like a shadow. Now, they'd walked in and turned it into a stage set. I stared at myself in the mirror over the bathroom sink. "Family shares everything," I whispered. "That's what people say. We help each other. Blood is thicker than contracts." But no one ever asks what happens when sharing becomes stealing. Back in the hallway, I noticed my keychain on the console table. The leather tag, navy blue, embossed with my initials, looked scuffed. It had always hung beside the back door, where I knew it would be safe. Someone had taken it, used it, tossed it here like it was just another object. I picked it up slowly, weighing it in my palm. For a long time, that key symbolized freedom. A door I could open, and finally, a space that was mine. Now it felt compromised. I slipped it into my purse, not to use it, but to remove it from their reach. The sun had nearly disappeared. The garden behind the house was bathed in orange light, casting long shadows across the stone paths. I walked outside toward the small statue Grandpa had placed years ago. A bronze bird with wings spread, perched on a column of weathered stone. "You told me this would be mine," I whispered to him. "You didn't tell me I'd have to defend it." The breeze shifted, brushing my face like a nod, or maybe just a reminder that silence was often louder than words. The next morning, I woke up to a sharp clattering sound, like metal scraping against stone. I stayed in bed for a moment, hoping it was a dream. But the sound came again, this time accompanied by a man's voice shouting instructions and the dull thump of tools. I got up, pulled on a sweatshirt, and walked barefoot down the hallway. From the kitchen window, I saw a crew of 2 workers digging up the old stone tiles near the patio. A wheelbarrow sat near my grandmother's garden bed, one of the jasmine bushes already uprooted and tossed aside like trash. Aurelia was standing beside them in yoga leggings and a cropped hoodie, gesturing animatedly with her phone in hand. "What's going on?" I asked, stepping out through the back door. She didn't turn to look at me. "We're prepping for the event next week," she said. "Contractors said they could do the new pavers in 2 days if we start early." "I didn't approve this," I said. "I didn't even know this was happening." "They're just stones, Alethea. Don't be so intense." She turned back to her phone. I walked into the kitchen and paused. The mugs had been moved. Mine, navy blue with a small chip on the rim, the one I reached for every morning, was gone. In its place sat a lineup of pastel cups with phrases like "choose joy" and "live, laugh, love." I opened a few cabinets, rearranged. She'd even labeled the spice jars. In the dining room, Mom was setting out paperwork, humming to herself. "Did you know about this construction?" I asked. She glanced up. "It'll be good for the space. Aurelia wants to host a few things this spring, and the patio was getting uneven." I looked around at the house I had poured my savings into, the wood I had sanded by hand, the fixtures I had spent hours choosing. None of it felt mine anymore. No one asked me what I had planned that weekend, or if the Jasmine was staying. I sat at the far end of the kitchen table with a plain bagel and black coffee in front of me. As I took a bite, I heard Aurelia's voice again from the hallway. "We need to fix the patio before my big event," she said, speaking louder than necessary. "The last thing we need is someone tripping during the photos." "What event?" I asked. She blinked, then tilted her head toward Mom. "Didn't we tell her?" Dad, who had just walked in holding his morning paper, glanced up. "She's hosting a fundraiser for her mentorship platform. It'll be good for the villa." The villa. Not your house, not Alethea's home, just the villa, as if it belonged to no one in particular, or to everyone but me. "Did anyone ask me first?" I said, my tone sharper than I intended. Mom gave me a polite smile. "Darling, it's still the family's, isn't it?" I pushed back from the table and stood. "No, it's not." Nobody responded. Back upstairs, I tried to focus on work, but my inbox felt like background noise. My mind wandered, back to a string of moments I hadn't let myself revisit. The time Aurelia borrowed my car without asking and put a dent in the passenger door. "It was parked, not even my fault," she'd said, tossing me the keys. She never offered to fix it. The night of my college graduation, when I brought my family to the ceremony, Aurelia showed up late, waltzing into the reception with a photographer in tow for a modeling shoot she'd booked last minute. Dad left midway through dinner to help her adjust her dress. I used to think they just didn't notice. Now I knew they noticed just enough to dismiss me. When someone borrows without permission, they assume you won't fight back. There's that old saying, possession is 9/10 of the law. But no one ever talks about the last 10th, what happens when you stay quiet and let people think that silence is surrender. I was sifting through my inbox when an auto-forwarded message popped up. Subject line, confirmed. Event at Aurelia's villa. Thank you for hosting. I clicked it. The nonprofit's name was familiar. They partnered with local influencers. The message detailed the event layout, timelines, catering, sponsors. My name wasn't mentioned once. I scrolled through the guest list. Aurelia was listed as owner visionary. Her photo, one she took on the villa's balcony, sat at the top of the email header. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. Later that evening, after the workers had packed up and the house settled into the quiet of late afternoon, I found Mom in the hallway, folding napkins. "Why does the world think this house is hers?" I asked. She didn't look up. "Because she's finally doing something worthwhile. Let her shine. It won't hurt you." Those words sat between us like a stone. It won't hurt you. It already had. I nodded slowly and walked away. In the living room, a stack of brochures caught my eye, draft invitations for the event. I picked one up. The layout was sleek, colors muted and elegant. It listed sponsors, keynote speakers, raffle donors. Nowhere was my name. I grabbed a pen from the side table, scribbled my name at the bottom right corner, pressed down so hard the ink bled through the paper. Then I tore it in half. It was a quiet moment. No yelling, no dramatic exit. Just a private act of defiance. I folded the torn pieces and placed them back on the pile, face up. Let them see what I refused to stay quiet about. Out in the garden, the evening was cooling down. I walked past the patio where jasmine had once lined the edge. The earth looked raw and angry without it. I stopped at the old oak tree Grandpa planted the year I was born. Its bark was rough, the trunk solid. I pressed my hand against it. "I can't protect this place," I whispered, "if I keep asking for permission to exist in it." Late Sunday afternoon, the sun hung low, casting warm stripes of light through the slats of my office blinds. I sat hunched over the desk, receipts spread around me like a paper moat, each one tied to a task I had done myself. The fireplace refacing, the custom window restoration, the $3,000 I'd paid to rewire the east wing without touching the plaster moldings. I was cataloging for taxes. I should have felt productive. Instead, my phone buzzed, a ping from my coworker, Jenna. "Didn't know your parents bought you the house. Nice." Confused, I clicked the notification. It took me to Instagram. Aurelia stood in front of the villa's courtyard in a white dress, barefoot, arms outstretched like she was welcoming the whole world to her kingdom. The caption read, "Can't thank my parents enough for this dream villa #blessed homeowner." My stomach twisted. Every detail in that shot, those bricks under her feet, the antique lanterns flanking the columns, the exact height of the lavender hedges, those were mine. I restored them. I financed them. I lived and breathed that restoration when no one else cared if the house even stood straight. And yet, she smiled like she built it. The rage wasn't loud. It didn't roar. It settled like wet cement in my chest. The comment section was worse. "So proud of you. Such a queen move. Your parents are amazing. This is what support looks like." Not a single person asked where I was. Because why would they? I wasn't part of the story she told. The truth isn't always what gets said. Sometimes it's what people leave out that screams loudest. I didn't even blink, just began taking screenshots. Every comment, every tag, every timestamp. Then, I opened a folder I hadn't touched in months. Shadowed achievements. I never named it. It had just grown over time, an accidental archive of erasures, pictures where I was cropped out, emails forwarded to Aurelia instead of me, awards my parents forgot to attend but remembered to post about later like they were there. I added a new file. @Aurelia, villaclaim.jpg. At dinner that evening, I brought it up casually. "I saw your post," I said, slicing into a piece of roast chicken. My voice was calm, practiced. Aurelia beamed. "You're welcome. It's blowing up. Great for the family brand." "The caption says they gave you the house." Dad didn't even look up from his plate. "It's just social media. Don't take it so seriously." "I take legal ownership seriously." Mom chimed in, adjusting her napkin. "She's not lying. We did help her build her confidence, didn't we?" "Confidence," I said evenly, "is not a property deed." Aurelia chuckled. You're so literal sometimes. You should try being a little more gracious. We're all family. Family. The word was their shield, their excuse, their way of saying, let it go. I didn't reply, just stared at the wine glass in front of me. I remembered a night from high school. I had won a statewide essay competition, one of 3 students selected to read their work at the Capitol. That same week, Aurelia had landed a local modeling feature in some glossy lifestyle magazine. At dinner, I brought up the ceremony, beaming, barely able to hide how proud I felt. And then, Aurelia pulled the magazine from her bag and passed it around the table. Her photo on page 5, wearing an oversized hat and holding a vintage bicycle, devoured all attention. No one asked about my speech. My father called the magazine a career starter. I had smiled, said nothing, ate quietly. Tonight, I tasted that same silence. Back upstairs, I drafted a post. My fingers typed quickly, fueled by adrenaline. This villa wasn't a gift. It was earned, brick by brick, night by night. I paused. The words were true, but they weren't right. Not for that platform, not for her audience. I deleted it. Instead, I opened my journal and wrote, I need to reclaim my name without losing my voice. Then I picked up the phone. Valdez answered on the second ring. Hey, she said. I think I need to show them, I said, voice steady. Not just say it. Actually show them. What happened? Aurelia. Instagram. She's telling the world this house is hers. Silence on the line. Then let's remind them whose name is on the title. I smiled, bitter, but thankful. That night, after brushing my teeth and turning off the lights, I walked back into my office. I printed out the Instagram post in color, pinned it to the corkboard above my desk. Right next to it, I tacked up a copy of the deed. Alethea M., Wren, sole legal owner. I leaned back, stared at them both. She took the credit, I said softly. I'll take control. The clatter of silverware and the aroma of roasted garlic filled the kitchen, but nothing about that evening felt warm. I'd come down early, thinking I'd help set the table, maybe bring out the salad or fold the napkins like I always did. But the table was already laid out, napkins pressed, place cards printed and placed. Mine wasn't among them. Aurelia stood near the center island, directing Mom and 2 neighbors who had arrived early. No, the rosemary sprigs go diagonally, she instructed, adjusting a bundle on the bread plate. She wore a pale green dress I'd never seen before. Her hair was curled and set like she'd walked off a magazine cover. Do you need anything? I asked, scanning the counter for a knife or something useful to carry. Mom barely glanced up. Oh no, sweetheart, everything's under control. Just show up and smile, okay? Show up and smile, like a guest. I turned to look at the dining area again. My usual seat, next to the window where I could slip out and take a breath during these long evenings, was gone. In its place was a decorative potted plant. Aurelia's place card sat at the head of the table. Mine was nowhere. I scanned until I found it, taped to a folding chair at the far corner, next to the coat rack. I took my place quietly. By the time dinner started, the house was full. A few family friends, some of Aurelia's online acquaintances, a local event planner, and someone who introduced himself as her brand manager. They all praised the ambiance, the lighting, the way Aurelia had brought the space to life. When someone complimented the molding on the walls, Aurelia smiled. We worked hard restoring it. My family really came together to make this house feel like a home. My fork paused mid-air. No one corrected her. Even Dad, who knew full well I paid for every inch of that crown molding out of my bonus check last year, just smiled proudly. Someone else asked about the garden. Aurelia leaned in. Oh, we had to dig up the original path, poor drainage, but the new pavers work so well with the minimalist theme I'm going for. I tried to speak. The pavers! Mom cut in, her voice light but firm. Let your sister talk, honey. She's on a roll. There was a beat of silence so loud I could hear my own breathing. I stared at my plate, suddenly feeling small. My wine glass trembled slightly when I picked it up. After dessert was served, I slipped away. No one noticed. Upstairs, I went to log into Netflix, just something familiar to dull the buzz in my head. The login screen blinked. Password incorrect. I tried again. Too many users. Please upgrade your plan. My profile was gone. Not renamed. Gone. I'd been paying for the account for 5 years. My saved lists, my recommendations, my watch history, deleted. It wasn't about Netflix. Not really. It was about being erased, overwritten. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the wall. A memory drifted up, uninvited. I was 10, standing on the front lawn in a pink dress, waiting to take a family photo before church. Aurelia had a meltdown about her shoes. While Mom and Dad calmed her down, the neighbor offered to take the photo. When I finally rejoined, the camera had already clicked. The photo went into the family album, my space filled by a shadow of the hedge behind me. They said it was an accident. It always is. The most effective way to erase someone is to tell them they're being too sensitive when they notice. That night, I found Mom in the kitchen, sipping chamomile tea. "Can I ask you something?" I said. She looked up, polite as ever. "Why is it that every time I assert something that belongs to me, I'm told to be more gracious?" She blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" "This house, this life. My name is on it, but everyone acts like I'm just visiting." She sighed. "It's just paperwork, darling. What matters is who fills it with love." I stepped closer, voice low. "If love means erasing me, then maybe it's time I started drawing new lines." She said nothing. The next morning, I packed up every single work file from the shared office, my restoration plans, contracts, design notes. I moved them to the studio room and locked the door. Aurelia found me halfway through. "What are you doing?" she asked. "This space is off limits now." Her eyebrows rose. "Is this because of the event?" I didn't look up. "You don't need to understand, just respect it," she scoffed. "Someone's dramatic this week." I shut the door gently behind her and turned the key. That night, I opened the Amazon Prime account on my laptop. Settings. Manage users. Delete, delete, delete. I whispered to myself as I hit confirm. Let's see how they like being locked out. It started with a walk. I'd gone out early that Saturday morning, thinking I'd enjoy the quiet. The air was cool, clean, with a hint of sagebrush from the neighbor's yard. I made a loop around the block, stopped by the bakery, and came home with a small box of croissants. I was looking forward to eating one in my studio while checking emails. Except when I returned, something had changed. I reached for the doorknob to the studio and paused. A black digital keypad had replaced the antique bronze handle I'd personally chosen. My key was useless. I tried anyway, twice. Nothing. Footsteps behind me. Aurelia, dressed in a soft pink tracksuit, holding an iced coffee with a straw she was aggressively chewing on. "It's for privacy," she said, not meeting my eyes. "Nothing personal." I didn't speak. I didn't trust my voice. Instead, I walked away. In the guest room, I dropped the croissant box on the dresser and sat down hard on the edge of the bed. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from a fury that had nowhere to go. I pressed my palms into my knees to keep them still. My therapist once told me, "Anger is information. Use it." So I did. I pulled out my laptop, folder after folder of documentation, restoration costs, deeds, email threads from the contractor, and a scanned copy of Grandpa's will. I compiled everything into one file titled Legal Proof, Villa. This wasn't going to be a screaming match. I wasn't going to throw plates or make ultimatums. I was going to let the facts speak. 2 hours later, while scanning through archived emails, I found it. Subject: Transfer of informal use rights to Aurelia, draft pending. It was a thread between my parents and our family attorney. I had been CC'd by accident. For once, the universe tilted in my favor. They were discussing giving Aurelia public positioning as the spokesperson of the villa. It was phrased with lawyerly vagueness, non-binding usage representation, verbal branding privileges, and other nonsense. But the intent was clear. They were rewriting the narrative without touching a single legal document, letting her play the face of a property she didn't own while I was erased. They even mentioned a local decor brand interested in partnering with the homeowner. I stared at the screen so long, the letters blurred. That afternoon, I called Loiena. We met at a small French cafe downtown. She was already there, nursing a cappuccino. I slid the laptop across to her, opened the email. She read it slowly, then leaned back. "They're not taking the house from you," she said. "They're taking the credit, the story. That's a narrative coup." I nodded. I don't care if she plays host to the yoga moms of Santa Fe, but this is mine. You want to push back? I want to draw a line they can't erase. That night, I called a house meeting. They were all in the living room, Mom with her tea, Dad behind his laptop, Aurelia scrolling on her phone. I walked in with a manila folder and laid it on the coffee table. Inside, the deed, the email printout, the notarized copies of the transfer from Grandpa's estate. "If anyone here is confused about who owns this home," I said, "let me make it painfully clear." Dad gave a dry laugh. "We're just helping Aurelia build momentum. It's not that deep." I looked at him, then at Mom. "Momentum doesn't give you the right to build on stolen land." Aurelia folded her arms. "You're blowing this way out of proportion. Nobody's trying to take anything from you." "You already did," I said. "You locked me out of my studio." "Because you made it all weird," she said. "You started pulling away. You treat the house like a museum." "Because it has history," I said firm. "It has meaning." They said nothing. The next morning, I installed my own locks. Old school, brass deadbolts. One on the studio, one on my bedroom. Then I typed a note in bold font, printed it, and taped it to the fridge. "No event may be hosted in this property without the written consent of Alethea M." At breakfast, Aurelia rolled her eyes when she saw it. "This is performative." "Call it what you want," I replied. "Just don't call it yours." That afternoon, I drafted an email to the nonprofit listed in the party brochure. Subject: Ownership Clarification Request, Villa Paloma. My cursor hovered over the send button. I whispered, "Next time, they won't have time to spin the story." But I hadn't realized they were already 3 steps ahead. It was late afternoon when I got home from an off-site meeting with a preservation board member. I'd spent the day talking about heritage, timelines, and architectural honesty, words that meant something to me. Words that used to mean something to my family, too. When I opened the front door, I froze. The walls were bright white, hospital white. The art I had curated, a combination of local painters and old family sketches, was gone, replaced with glossy, generic prints of pastel shapes. The worn leather armchairs, swapped out for tufted velvet, and the light fixtures I'd hand-picked from an antique dealer downtown had been ripped out. My eyes landed on the empty spot where Grandma's clock had once ticked. My throat tightened. Then I noticed the coffee table, Grandpa's, the one he built with hand tools, the one I had restored when I inherited the house. Missing. I dropped my bag. Aurelia walked in from the hallway like nothing was wrong. "You like it?" she said, gesturing at the room with her iced drink in hand. "My stylist said the old look was dragging the energy down. This feels lighter." I said nothing. I couldn't. If I opened my mouth, it wasn't going to be calm. It was going to be war. Instead, I turned and walked through the kitchen, into the garage. There, under plastic sheets, were the remnants of my home. Furniture piled on furniture, dust settling like judgment. I yanked the tarp back and saw the clock lying sideways on a wicker basket. Grandpa's table, shoved beneath a broken shelf. And then, peeking from the bottom, a wooden chair leg, splintered. I crouched, brushed the dust away with the sleeve of my sweater. It was the chair he used at his desk. So that's what history was now. Heavy, inconvenient, disposable. I stood, staring at the heap like it was a body. And maybe it was. Because this wasn't about furniture. This was memory, legacy, blood. I walked upstairs, needing air. Some distance. A distraction. I made the mistake of opening Instagram. The first post on my feed. Aurelia's face. The caption read, "Redesigning my dream villa, feeling so lucky to finally create a space that reflects me." Hundreds of comments. "She's glowing." "This is what owning your space looks like." "Your parents must be so proud." "Vibe check. Past! I felt the rage climb my chest. Again, no mention of the house's history, no nod to Grandpa, no acknowledgement of what came before her ring lights and photo angles. Just her. Always her. I typed a comment. This home was built by our grandfather. It was never a blank slate. I hit send. Within minutes, the comment vanished. My phone buzzed. Aurelia. Please don't ruin the vibe. It's not personal. It's branding. Mom, not long after. Don't stir up drama. She's building something for once. Let her have this. Let her have what? The illusion? The applause? I closed the app and threw the phone onto my bed. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it. Not fear, not even pain. Something else. A fracture, widening. An hour later, I found myself in the hallway, standing in front of a mirror Aurelia had hung. It was oversized, backlit. It reflected everything she wanted people to see. She walked past. Where are the family photos? I asked. She paused. They clashed with the aesthetic. Besides, they didn't mean anything to my audience. I blinked. They weren't for your audience. They were for us. She gave a half shrug. Then maybe you should have made them look better. It wasn't a jab. It was worse. It was sincerity. She believed that. I went to the attic and dug out an old hard drive I hadn't touched in over a year. It was labeled Restoration. I plugged it in. The screen lit up with folders, photos, videos, voice memos. There I was, covered in paint, describing how we reinforced the original molding in the hallway. There was the day the windows arrived. The before and after shots of the fireplace, and there was my voice, narrating it all, explaining Grandpa's preferences, Grandma's quirks, why we'd saved the wisteria vine instead of cutting it down. I opened editing software. This wasn't for the family anymore. This was for the truth. I named the file, Villa Before the Rewrite. And I started cutting, stitching, sharpening audio. My voice wasn't polished. It wasn't influencer quality. But it was real. It was rooted. When I finished, hours later, I uploaded it to a secure drive. I didn't post it online, not yet, but I shared the private link with Valdis. If they wipe it all out, I told her, someone will still know the truth. She responded in less than a minute. You're not the only one who remembers. I stared at the screen, the play button glowing like a quiet heartbeat. They'd taken the furniture. But I hadn't realized. They were about to erase more than wood and photos. Saturday night arrived with an eerie kind of stillness. From the outside, Villa Paloma glowed. Warm string lights crisscrossed the courtyard, casting delicate shadows over the freshly mowed lawn. Guests had started to arrive in clusters, dressed in smart casual, sipping champagne as they wandered through the open French doors. But I hadn't been told about any of this. When I walked in, heels soft against the original pine floor I had fought to preserve, the entry table was covered in glossy pamphlets. At the top, hosted by Aurelia Wren, owner of Villa Paloma. My stomach turned. I scanned the room. The statue of my grandfather in the garden had been veiled in white roses and eucalyptus, now bearing a sign that read, Event underwritten by Opal Wellness. The family crest was gone, replaced by a hashtag. People mingled easily, complimenting Aurelia's vision. Her voice floated through the space like perfume, loud, polished, present in every corner. I smiled through gritted teeth and said hello, shaking hands with guests who looked past me seconds after our introductions. An hour into the evening, the MC stepped up to the microphone. We're so grateful to be here at this incredible space, generously opened by the talented Aurelia Wren and her wonderful family. A few heads turned toward me when he gestured vaguely in my direction. She's got such a great team, the MC continued, including her dear cousin Alethea, who helped coordinate logistics. My blood went cold. I froze mid-step, champagne glass halfway to my lips. Around me, conversations faltered. One guest whispered, "Cousin?" Another added, "I thought she lived here." I approached the MC after his speech. "Hi," I said, keeping my voice calm. "Just a note, you said I'm Aurelia's cousin. I'm her sister, and also the owner of this house." He blinked. "Oh, sorry, that's what was written in the script. PR said cousin, and that she's the owner. Of course. I stepped out onto the patio, finding a quiet pocket near the back wall. The air was crisp, scented faintly with lavender and new money. My hands trembled, not from embarrassment, but betrayal. Again. I thought of a quote I once read. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. Maya Angelou had said it. I'd ignored it. I had been bending, softening, holding my tongue, all in the name of grace. But grace wasn't working. It wasn't protecting anything. It was just making it easier for them to erase me. What if dignity didn't mean swallowing everything down? What if dignity meant letting it rise? A woman approached me, cheerful and tipsy. Your cousin is so inspiring, she said. You must be proud. I smiled politely. Did she tell you how this house came to be? The woman tilted her head. Didn't she inherit it? I held her gaze. No. She inherited nothing. And I walked away before she saw how tightly I was gripping my clutch. After the party, I found Aurelia in the kitchen, barefoot, sipping wine straight from the bottle. Why can't you let me have this? She said before I could open my mouth. You've had everything. Everything? I repeated. The paperwork, the paint fumes, the financial burden? That's what you think is everything? She shook her head. No one sees you, Alethea. You're invisible. I walk into a room and people listen. You walk in and no one notices. I stared at her for a long time. Then maybe it's time they finally do. She rolled her eyes and stormed out. Later that night, I walked the house in silence. Empty glasses still sat on the side tables. Brochures were folded neatly on every surface. I picked up a few. Aurelia's name everywhere. Mine, nowhere. I photographed everything, the programs, the scripts, even the posters still taped to the garden fence. I added them to the folder on my computer, titled Erasure Evidence. I called Loyena. They just introduced her as the owner, I said. She paused, then replied, Good, that just became admissible motive. We're not waiting anymore. I ended the call and opened a Word doc. I wrote a summary of the night. Facts, not feelings. Facts don't ask for permission. At 2:17 a.m., I sat in my studio, surrounded by the evidence. Paper, photographs, screenshots. The sound of the refrigerator humming in the next room felt louder than it should. They wanted a performance, I whispered, glancing at the discarded script. I looked up at the corkboard across the room. I'll give them a headline instead. The next evening, the house was too quiet, like it knew what was coming. I called for a family meeting. That's how I phrased it, out of habit, though I wasn't sure what that word meant anymore. We gathered in the dining room, under the chandelier my grandfather had chosen, the one Aurelia now referred to as dated. I placed a thick folder on the table. Inside, screenshots of her posts, printed brochures from the charity event, guest programs, and a paper trail of emails where I had been erased again and again. I didn't raise my voice. You all know what you've done, I said evenly. I'm just asking you to say it out loud. Dad leaned back in his chair, sighing like he was too tired for this. Mom fidgeted with the edge of the table runner. Aurelia, still holding her phone, glanced at me, smirked, and said nothing. I turned to Dad. Do you acknowledge that I own this home? He didn't flinch. Aurelia needs it more. It hit like a slap. She's building something. You'll be fine. She deserves this chance. Every part of me froze. My throat, my chest, even my fingers gripping the edge of the chair. Of course. Of course she deserved it more. She always had. I heard echoes from childhood. Be the bigger sister. Let her go first. She's younger. She's still figuring herself out. I stared at him. Understanding won't fix what you destroyed. I didn't wait for a response. I stood up, walked out into the cool night. The garden was quiet, lit by dim solar lights. Near the shed, something caught my eye. An old picture frame wedged beside a tipped-over trash bin. I knew it before I touched it. I pulled it out. The glass was cracked, the frame chipped. Dust smeared the surface, but I wiped it clean with my sleeve. It was the photo of Grandpa and me. He was holding my hand in the courtyard, both of us covered in dust and paint during the early stages of the restoration. On the back, in his handwriting, "To the one who sees value, not vanity." My knees bent on instinct. I sat on the ground, holding it close. I didn't cry. I went inside, took a shower, changed into something soft, and called Valdis. "I think I hit the wall," I said when she answered. She didn't ask which wall. She knew. "They've been erasing you because they're afraid of what you prove," she said. "That you didn't need them, that you made something of value without their help." We talked about families that rewrite history, edit memory to make the narrative cleaner, more flattering to the ones in control. "They kept my name off everything," I said, "so they could say it was always theirs." Valdis didn't argue. "This isn't about the house anymore, is it?" "No," I said. "It's about legacy." And I knew exactly what I had to do. I went to the study and pulled out the photo again. I cleaned the frame, replaced the cracked glass with one from the attic, then hung it above the fireplace in the private study, the room Aurelia's stylist team never touched. Below it, I placed a copy of the deed, clean, official, signed. Then I opened my laptop and began writing. Not a rant, not a blog post. A formal statement to the press and the city council. Subject: Restoring the Record, the True History of Villa Paloma. I outlined the renovations, included receipts, photographs, timelines. I included my grandfather's words, his handwritten notes, even the original inspection reports I had handled myself. There was nothing angry in the document, just truth, layered and undeniable. That's when Dad walked in. "You're being dramatic," he said. "No," I replied. "I'm being accurate, and that's what's new to you." He looked at the framed photo on the wall, then at me. "This is still your family." "Then maybe your family should have acted like it lived in my house," I said. He didn't respond. That night, I sat alone in the study. The soft light from the desk lamp framed the picture, the deed, and the edges of my face reflected faintly in the glass. They had tried to rewrite the story, but I wasn't silent anymore. "If they want to rewrite the story," I whispered, "they'll have to do it without my silence." That Thursday afternoon, I noticed a figure at the front gate as I walked down the upstairs hallway. From the window, I saw an elderly man standing with his hands in his coat pockets. He wasn't moving, just staring at the villa. Curious, I headed downstairs and opened the door. Before I could reach him, Aurelia's assistant stepped out from the side path. "Excuse me, sir," she called, waving her hand like she was swatting a fly. "This is a private residence. You need an appointment." The man blinked, nodded politely, and began turning away. "Wait," I called. He stopped. I jogged across the courtyard. "I'm sorry," I said, breath catching. "Don't go." He looked at me, then smiled softly. "Alethea?" I nodded. He extended his hand. "Lionel, your grandfather's friend. We served together on the preservation board." That name hit me like a bell. "I wanted to stop by," he said, voice quiet. "Pay respects, but I understand this isn't a good time." "No, it is," I said quickly. "Please, can we talk?" We walked a few feet down the sidewalk. He leaned against the low stone wall, hands still in his pockets. "He always said," Lionel began, "you were the one with the backbone. Said you noticed what others missed." I smiled tightly. "Noticed, yes, but no one ever listened." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small flash drive. "He gave this to me," he said. "Told me if things ever got complicated, it should go to you." I held it like a relic. My heart pounded. "Thank you," I said. We hugged. Brief, firm. Later that evening, I sat alone in the studio. The flash drive in my palm, warm from my touch. I plugged it into my laptop. A single file blinked on screen. Paloma, personal note, MP3. I clicked play, and there it was. His voice, raspy, slower than I remembered, but unmistakable. "If you're hearing this," he began, "it means the story has wandered too far from the truth." He spoke of the house, how it was built, why it mattered. "This villa isn't valuable because it's old," he said. "It's valuable because it's been cared for." He spoke of me. She stayed. She worked. She remembered. This house is hers. no matter who tries to reframe it. My hand covered my mouth. Tears came, but not from grief, not anymore. They came from being seen. That voice, that trust, cut through months of manipulation and silence. I played it again, and again. And then I opened the folder labeled Erasure Evidence. Documents, screenshots, photos, scripts, all of it was there. But this was different. This wasn't revenge. This was restoration. Later that night, I called Valdez. "I have something," I said. "What kind of something?" "Unarguable." I told her about the audio, about Lionel, about the truth preserved in his voice. She was quiet for a beat. "You ready to go public?" "I'm done hiding." We spoke about the exhibit. A limited showcase. Legacy versus influence. A family's two paths. Not a smear campaign, just facts, just proof. 2 days later, Lionel posted a photo of the house, captioned, "Honored to visit Alethea at the villa her grandfather loved so dearly. He chose right." It spread fast. Dad called that afternoon. "That wasn't necessary," he said. No hello. "Neither was rewriting my life," I answered. Silence. Then he hung up. I didn't expect anything else. That night, I lit a candle in front of the framed photo I'd restored, the one they had tossed like garbage. Grandpa and I, smiling, paint stains on our shirts. His voice echoed in my mind. They took his photo off the wall, but they couldn't take the voice. "I have it now," I whispered, "and I'm done keeping it quiet." The sunlight had already shifted westward by the time I pulled back into the driveway. From the front gate, I could see shadows moving across the living room. People, too many of them. I stepped out of the car, heels crunching against gravel. Loud voices echoed. Laughter, flashes from a camera, the sharp ring of a director snapping commands. Lights rigged to the porch, models draped across the velvet couch that used to sit in the study. A faux fire burning on the screen above the fireplace. Aurelia stood in the middle of it all, mid-pose in a beige jumpsuit. A stylist was adjusting her collar while another assistant pointed to a clipboard. Above the doorframe, a white banner read, "Maison Opal, Living Elevated." I saw it before I felt it. Their logo, printed and posted on the front gate. And on the door. My door. I didn't scream. I didn't demand. I simply walked inside, past the camera crew, through the haze of ring lights and staged candlesticks. My blood roared, but my steps didn't falter. Inside, I reached for my phone. "Loiena," I said the second she picked up. "They've commercialized the property without consent. Full shoot, brand logos on the house." "On it," she replied. "Give me an hour." She didn't need that long. By 5 p.m., a cease and desist had been delivered. The producer read it out loud with disbelief. Equipment was yanked down. Models shuffled off set. Lights went dark. Aurelia stormed into the foyer, cheeks flushed. "You humiliated me in front of a brand I've been chasing for months." I didn't flinch. "You used my home to sell your image. That contract just sold your credibility." "You didn't have to make it public," she snapped. "You made it public when you turned this house into a showroom." That night, the dining table was silent. I stood at the head, a thick manila envelope in hand. I placed it down gently. Inside, certified deed copies, legal notices, a formal 14-day eviction clause. "You need to leave," I said. "You have 2 weeks." My father's face turned scarlet. "We're your family." I met his gaze. "Then you should have acted like it." No one spoke. I watched their reactions. Aurelia looked stunned. Mom blinked hard, like the words were water in her eyes. Dad clenched his fists, but none of them moved. As they sat there stunned, my mind spiraled backward. The car keys Aurelia had taken without asking. The time she hosted a party at the villa when I was out of town. The light fixtures she replaced without telling me. The couch, the photos, the pavers in the garden. Every single moment where I'd said nothing, because I thought, next time, they'll respect me. But next time never came. So I made this one count. The next morning, I posted the video. Title: Clarification on the ownership of Villa Paloma. No theatrics, no drama, just facts. The deed, the will, restoration records, screenshots, audio, history. my voice steady. The video spread faster than I expected. Within 12 hours, it had passed 50,000 views. By evening, over 80,000. People shared it, commented. Why didn't she say anything sooner? She handled this with more grace than I ever could. Proof wins over PR. Aurelia's face vanished from Maison Opal's brand page. Their statement came quick. We regret the misrepresentation. Her influencer page tanked. Comments disabled. Followers down. Partnerships paused. Mom sobbed in the kitchen. You've torn this family apart. I stirred my coffee. No, I just stopped letting it sit on top of me. I didn't need her to agree. I just needed her to hear it. That night, after the dust had settled and the villa had returned to its quiet, I sat at my laptop. The view count ticked higher. 91 to 113. Then 99 to 214. I closed the screen, leaned back in the chair. For the first time, I whispered, the truth isn't something I have to keep. The house was still. No Aurelia, no stylists, no camera crews unpacking ring lights or dragging ottomans across the floor. No voices rehearsing introductions in the living room. Just silence. I walked barefoot into the kitchen, the tiles cool against my skin. For the first time in months, the space looked like it remembered itself. The mismatched mugs were gone, replaced with the ones Grandma collected. The clatter of artificial living had finally disappeared. I brewed coffee in peace, poured it into the chipped navy mug I hadn't touched in weeks, sipped slowly at the island. There was no tension in the air, no one filling the space with curated chaos. I breathed in deep. This was stillness, not absence, but conclusion. Then, I moved room by room. In the guest hallway, I took down the pastel art prints Aurelia had hung. In the study, I removed the aromatherapy diffusers and returned the bookshelf to its rightful corner. I found a cardboard box shoved behind the sofa, labeled in thick Sharpie, to dump. Inside, family heirlooms, old recipes, photographs, my grandfather's cufflinks, a carved letter opener from my great-grandmother, all buried under cheap throws and broken frames. I cradled the cufflinks in my hand, gently placed them back in the top drawer of the study desk. Upstairs, I reinstalled the light fixture I'd taken down before the charity event, rehung the family portrait over the mantel. This wasn't restoration. This was resurrection. By mid-morning, the rooms no longer whispered someone else's name. They echoed mine again. On the dining table, beneath a decorative bowl of dried lavender, sat an envelope. To Alethea, it read. Handwritten. My mother's script. Neat, but tentative. I sat down and unfolded the letter. I still don't understand your need for ownership, it began. But I hope you find peace. No apology, no admission. Just a line in the sand dressed up as grace. I read it twice, not because I needed to, but because I knew it would be the last time she explained herself. I didn't feel anger, just confirmation. I did find peace, I whispered to the air. You just never thought I could without you. That afternoon, I met Valdis at a cafe tucked behind a bookstore downtown. We sat in the courtyard, sunlight dappling the table. So, she asked, how's the silence? Loud, I said, smiling. But mine. We talked about the fallout. Aurelia hadn't posted in days. Dad hadn't called. No one was knocking on the villa door demanding explanations. Sometimes, Valdis said, stirring her tea, the absence of apology is the answer. I nodded. And the presence of silence is finally a boundary respected. The villa didn't feel safer because it was quieter. It felt safer because I had redefined what it meant to belong inside it. Later that evening, I began preparing dinner. No camera, no agenda. Just a table, a few chairs, sautéed vegetables, warm bread, grilled fish. I invited 2 coworkers and Valdis. We drank wine, laughed about our worst dates, argued over best movie endings. There was no pressure, no need to defend a title, just space, mine, filled with the kind of energy that didn't have to be filtered. Family used to mean people I had to bend for. Now, it meant people I could breathe with. After everyone left, I rinsed the plates, folded the napkins, and walked into the garden. The sky had shifted to dusky pink, clouds soft like silk. The roses Grandpa planted had bloomed, quietly, defiantly. I walked to the back wall and knelt. There, I placed a small stone I'd had engraved weeks earlier. 3 words, simple, certain. Here I remained. Not a claim, not a weapon, just truth. Back inside, as the last light faded through the stained glass window, my phone buzzed. An email from the city council. They wanted me to speak at their next Heritage Preservation Forum. The subject, Private Legacy, Public Memory. I stared at the screen, then smiled. I guess it starts with one house, I whispered. A month had passed since the video went public, since I stopped fighting for the truth and simply stated it, since they could no longer deny what had always been right in front of them. I walked through the neighborhood that morning, my steps slower, more grounded. The same neighbors who once gave me polite nods now greeted me with warmth. Good morning, Alethea, Mrs. Garner said, waving from her porch. They finally know the truth, huh? I smiled, small but genuine. They do. There was no need to explain. The whispers that once carried rumors now carried respect. My name wasn't just murmured behind hands anymore. It was spoken in acknowledgement. And when I got back to the villa, I felt it too. This place had absorbed so much silence, so much taking. But now, it stood with me. Not just a house, but a quiet witness that had finally chosen to speak. That afternoon, I hosted a meeting in the study. The local historical society, 2 members from the city council, and a heritage writer from the State Preservation Board sat with me. We'd be honored, one of them said, to have you as our keynote speaker this fall. Topic? I asked. Legacy, restoration, the personal made public. I nodded. It wasn't grace, I said quietly, that got me here. It was resolve. Grace was what I used before they pushed me too far. They understood, and they listened, and when I signed the speaking agreement, I signed not as someone's daughter, not as someone's sister, but as the homeowner. The following morning, an email from the estate attorney arrived. Subject: Objection to historical registration. Aurelia and my parents were contesting the motion I'd filed to register the villa as a protected site. They cited emotional heritage. A last gasp. I didn't flinch. I responded with one email. Attached: Grandpa's audio file, the notarized deed, the promotional material where Aurelia falsely claimed ownership. Loiena replied the next morning. They've withdrawn all objections. That evening, just before sunset, I saw her. Aurelia, standing at the garden gate, alone, clutching something in her hands. I didn't open the gate. I walked down to meet her. You really did it, she said, barely louder than the breeze. You turned it all back around. No, I replied. I turned it right side up. It was never yours to flip in the first place. She looked down. I didn't think it would go this far. I stayed silent. She tried again. You used to be quiet. You used your charm, I said. I used evidence. That's the difference. I didn't invite her inside. She didn't ask. Later that week, I installed a small bronze plaque at the front gate. It read, Villa Paloma, restored by Alethea M. I partnered with a preservation group. Once a season, I'd open the villa for tours, by my terms. It would remain lived in, loved, imperfect. But it would also stand as proof of survival, of boundaries, of ownership earned. The first tour brought a group of college students, 2 retired architects, and an elderly woman who whispered, I always thought you were the quiet one. Turns out, you were just the one building something real. I didn't correct her. In the quiet that followed, I thought about justice, not as revenge, not as winning, but as undeniability. Toni Morrison once said, you want to fly? You gotta give up the shit that weighs you down. I let go of their approval, their twisted versions. I forgave no one, but I freed myself anyway. Justice came not through apology, but through recognition. That night, as twilight fell across the property, I walked the halls alone. The villa breathed with me now. Light flickered on wood, casting familiar shadows across the floors. I ran my hand along the wall, the texture rough and warm beneath my fingertips. "You were always mine," I whispered. I just needed to remember that.